A rude awakening. Manuel Zelaya woke up last Sunday to find his presidential palace under attack.
They machine-gunned my house in the early morning hours. I know my guards were resisting for at least 20 minutes because I was awakened by my guards shooting and the yelling. I got out wearing night clothes. This is how I am in Costa Rica, because when I left, immediately they were firing at me. This is a kidnapping. This is an extortion of the Honduran democratic system.
Zelaya says soldiers forced him into a vehicle at gunpoint. He was shortly afterwards put on a plane to Costa Rica. Honduran troops also briefly seized the Venezuelan, Cuban, and Nicaraguan ambassadors as they tried to prevent the capture of the Honduran foreign minister. The military coup happened hours before a national consultation. The consultation was to gauge the level of public support for a referendum on forming a constituent assembly to rewrite the constitution. Zelaya's enemies claim he wanted to use this to seek a second term in office, something the current constitution forbids. Zelaya has insisted he does not want to seek re-election. General Romeo Vasquez refused to distribute the polling materials, calling the consultation illegal. 4 days before the coup, Zelaya fired Vasquez. And then the Supreme Court reinstated him. Almost simultaneously, Congress passed a ban on referenda. Then the Supreme Court ruled the consultation illegal and said it had ordered the army to remove Zelaya. Most analysts see the referendum as the direct cause of the coup.
The term expansion bid is the butterfly effect of Chavez's success in February's referendum, which lifted the limit on his presidential terms. In recent years, there has been a regional trend of leaders pursuing the lifting of constitutional limits by democratic means. But unlike Chavez, Zelaya faced a much stronger enemy, the army and opposite conservative parties.
Hours after Zelaya was ousted, Honduran deputies voted to accept an apparently forged letter of resignation and named Congress leader Roberto Michellette as acting president.
My immediate task will be to work tirelessly to bring back the peace and calmness that we have lost. I will work so that all Honduran men and women will be friends again.
But the military wouldn't find any friends among Zelaya's supporters. Unrest erupted on the streets of the capital, Tegucigalpa. Popular movements set up anti-coup roadblocks all over the country. Some of the clashes led to bloodshed.
I represent the people because we do not agree with what they did with the president.
The president took office in 2006. A rancher born into the oligarchy, Zelaya's policies have been mildly social democratic, such as raising the minimum wage. In the past 2 years, as the Latin American political wind has blown leftward, he's begun to ally himself with Venezuela, Bolivia, and Nicaragua. Last August, Zelaya alienated the leaders of the country's main political parties by joining the leftist Bolivarian Alternative for the Americas. The alliance is led by Venezuela's populist president, Hugo Chavez. Much of Zelaya's liberal party turned against him. The other longtime ruling party, the more right-leaning National Party, was happy to endorse the coup. Analysts say the Honduras coup is in fact a wrestling match between the left wing and the right wing.
In recent years, the left-wing parties have gained great support from the middle and lower classes in Latin America, and the leftist leaders want to do more to revolutionize their countries. But that will meet strong resistance from the old power holders, the conservative right.
In the past 3 years, a new generation of center-left leaders has taken Latin American politics in a new direction. But the right is fighting back. In 2007, a constitutional referendum in Venezuela was narrowly defeated. Hugo Chavez suffered the first election defeat of his 9-year presidency. Last weekend, Argentine President Cristina Fernandez's ruling bloc suffered a series of stinging blows in a midterm election. And now in Honduras, there's been a military coup.
Well, Honduras has a history of military coups. Soldiers overthrew elected presidents in 1963 and again in 1972. The army didn't turn the government over to civilians until 1981 under US pressure. The country had been politically stable since the end of military rule back in the early 1980s, but the coup last weekend has pushed Honduras into chaos once again.
For impoverished Honduras, last Sunday's coup was the 6th. Honduras is home to 7 million people and a major drug trafficking transit point. The country lives off coffee and textile exports and remittances from its workers abroad. Now it has to deal with the global downturn, which has curbed its economic growth. Under Zelaya, Honduras became an ally of Venezuela's President Hugo Chavez, whose influence has boosted socialists to power in the region. Latin America's leftist leaders were quick to condemn this coup and isolate Micheletti.
I think that this man, Mr. Micheletti, will end up in jail or have to go into exile. Well, if they do swear in Micheletti or Pelletti or Gaffetti or Goraletti, we will overthrow him. That's what I say.
On Wednesday, the Organization of American States gave the interim government 72 hours to restore democracy or face possible suspension. The UN General Assembly also approved a resolution calling for the reinstatement of Zelaya. U.S. President Barack Obama joined in condemning the coup, and Washington suspended joint military operations with Honduras.
I think it would be a terrible precedent if we start moving backwards into the era in which we are seeing military coups as a means of political transition rather than democratic elections.
President Obama's response marks a contrast to his predecessor, George W. Bush. In 2002, Venezuelan President Chavez was ousted by dissident military officers. He returned to power 2 days later with the help of loyalist generals and protests by supporters. But the Bush administration went against the regional consensus by initially welcoming the coup.
I meant what I said.
Wu Hongying gives her view on the change in U.S. attitude.
Since Obama took office, he has been trying to mend Washington's battered image in Latin America. This April, he extended a hand of friendship to America's hemispheric neighbors at the Summit of the Americas. Besides, the U.S. has maintained a close trade relationship with Honduras, and it maintains a major air base in the country. So any political turbulence in Honduras will do no good to the U.S. strategic interests in Latin America.
The streets of Tegucigalpa are tense but calm. People are waiting to see what will happen next. And given Honduras's turbulent history, it could be just the lull before another storm.
Well, let's look at the backdrop to all this, because the coup is Central America's biggest political crisis in decades. Analysts say 3 factors will determine the future of Honduras. The first is how long Zelaya's supporters will hold out. The second is how long the interim government will resist. And the third is how effective the OSA mandate will be, and of course the attitude of the United States. Up next, we'll take you to Iraq to look at the withdrawal of American troops.